Welcome to Europe Pulse News. Today we bring you the most critical stories shaking the European continent, from France's historic nuclear expansion to Europe finding itself on the front lines of the Iran conflict and a groundbreaking deal with Switzerland. Today's developments are reshaping Europe's future in real time. Let's dive into the stories that matter. Our top story today: the Iran conflict has arrived at Europe's doorstep, forcing the continent to confront a security crisis it didn't initiate but cannot ignore. Following the joint United States and Israeli strikes on Iran over the weekend, which resulted in the death of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and dozens of senior Iranian officials, Iran has launched a wave of retaliatory attacks that directly hit European positions. Early this morning, an Iranian drone struck the British Royal Air Force Base at Akrotiri in Cyprus, hitting a runway and forcing the cancellation of flights across the island. Cyprus President Nikos Christodoulidis was forced to cancel an informal EU ministers' meeting due to the attack. 2 additional drones and 2 ballistic missiles targeting Cyprus were intercepted by British and Cypriot air defenses. But Cyprus wasn't the only European target. Over the weekend, Iranian missiles and drones targeted multinational military bases in Erbil, Iraq, and Al-Azraq, Jordan, where German, French, Norwegian, Swedish, Italian, and Dutch forces are stationed. German soldiers were forced into air raid shelters as defense systems activated. Fortunately, no European casualties have been reported from these strikes. The impact extends far beyond military installations. Over 30,000 German citizens and similar numbers of Spanish nationals are currently stranded across the Middle East as regional airspace closures have grounded more than 11,000 flights since Saturday. The European Union has launched emergency evacuation efforts, with Germany, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia organizing special flights to bring their citizens home. The European Union's response has been cautious but firm. In a statement released on March 1st, the EU High Representative emphasized that Europe is following developments with utmost concern and called for maximum restraint from all parties. The EU stressed protection of civilians and respect for international law, while warning that any drawn-out war would be devastating for the Middle East region. Perhaps most concerning for European security officials, fears of Iranian sleeper cells activating on European soil. Mark Henrichman of Germany's Parliamentary Control Committee warned that the escalation in the Middle East doesn't just affect the region itself, and noted increased chatter between suspected terrorist cells. Last May, UK authorities foiled what they described as the biggest counter-terror operation in years, a plot involving Iranian nationals that was just hours from execution. The economic consequences are already visible. European markets plunged Monday, with the Stoxx 600 down 1.7%, Germany's DAX falling 1.9%, and airline stocks hammered, IAG down 6% and TUI down over 8%. Meanwhile, energy stocks surged as European natural gas prices jumped more than 20% and Brent crude oil climbed 9% to around $78 per barrel. The Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 15 million barrels of oil and 80 million tons of liquefied natural gas passed last year, remains the biggest concern for Europe's energy security. From one crisis to another, but this time with a European solution. In a historic speech delivered yesterday at France's Île-Longue nuclear submarine base, President Emmanuel Macron announced France will increase its nuclear arsenal for the first time since 1992 and extend nuclear protection across Europe in what he calls forward deterrence. To be free, one needs to be feared, Macron declared, standing before nuclear submarines that carry more firepower than all bombs dropped on Europe during World War II. And to be feared, we must be powerful. 8 European nations have agreed to participate in this groundbreaking initiative: Germany, the United Kingdom, Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Greece, Sweden, and Denmark. these countries will be able to host French strategic air forces, nuclear-capable aircraft, that can be deployed across the European continent to complicate the calculations of our adversaries. France currently maintains approximately 290 nuclear warheads, making it the world's fourth largest nuclear power and the only nuclear nation within the European Union. Macron announced this number will increase, though he declined to specify by how much, reversing France's past transparency on arsenal size. The forward deterrence strategy includes three key components. European allies will participate in French nuclear deterrence exercises. Conventional forces from partner nations can join France's nuclear activities, and most significantly, French nuclear-armed aircraft may be temporarily deployed to Allied territories. Hours after Macron's speech, Paris and Berlin issued a joint statement announcing a high-ranking nuclear steering group between the two countries, with German forces set to participate in French nuclear exercises this year. But Macron was absolutely clear on one point: France alone controls the nuclear trigger. There will be no sharing of the ultimate decision, he emphasized. By virtue of our Constitution, it belongs only to the President of the Republic. This move reflects Europe's growing anxiety about American reliability. With President Donald Trump's unpredictable stance towards NATO and European defense, leaders across the continent are hedging their bets. Bruno Tertrai of the Foundation for Strategic Research called this the most significant update to French nuclear deterrence policy in 30 years. The timing is striking, scheduled before the Iran crisis, but landing amid escalating Middle East tensions and continued concerns about Russian aggression. Macron described a world that is hardening, with adversaries bolder and nuclear risks higher than at any point in recent memory. For Europe, the message is clear: we will defend ourselves. Now to a more positive development that's been a decade in the making. Yesterday, in Brussels, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Swiss President Viola Amherd signed a comprehensive package of 18 agreements that fundamentally reshape the European Union and Switzerland, a deal known as Bilateral 3. This is no minor diplomatic achievement. The agreement grants Switzerland frictionless access to a market of 460 million consumers across the European Union, while Switzerland commits to dynamically adopting European law in covered sectors and significantly increasing its financial contributions to EU cohesion programs from 130 million Swiss francs annually to 350 million francs starting in 2030. The package includes new agreements on electricity market integration, food safety standards, health cooperation, and participation in the European Space Agency. It also updates 4 existing agreements covering air transport, land transport, free movement of persons, and mutual recognition of standards. This represents a stunning turnaround from 2021, when Switzerland unilaterally scrapped a decade of negotiations on a framework agreement, leaving the relationship in limbo. What's different this time? Rather than one overarching framework agreement, the new package takes a modular approach, a suite of sectoral deals, each with its own dispute resolution mechanism. For Switzerland, the stakes are enormous. The EU is by far its largest trading partner, accounting for over half of Swiss exports and 74% of imports. For the EU, Switzerland represents a critical partner in the heart of Europe, geographically and economically important, especially for energy cooperation, as Europe diversifies away from Russian gas. The agreement stands in sharp contrast to the way the United Kingdom exited the EU. While Brexit created friction and economic costs, Switzerland has managed to deepen its integration with the EU single market while maintaining its independence, a model some see as potentially instructive for future EU relationships with neighboring nations. European Internal Market Commissioner Stéphane Séjourné called the agreement a win-win for both sides, emphasizing that it removes uncertainty for businesses and creates new opportunities for cooperation in cutting-edge sectors like green energy and space technology.
Swiss business leaders have largely welcomed the deal, seeing it as essential for maintaining competitiveness and avoiding the kind of barriers that have complicated post-Brexit trade between the UK and EU. In other European news today, the European Parliament's Civil Liberties Committee has endorsed Andres Ritter for the position of European Chief Prosecutor. Parliament also adopted new measures to protect European farmers from unfair trading practices and called for renewed funding to implement the EU's Beating Cancer Plan. This week marks 4 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the European Parliament in an extraordinary plenary session, calling for continued European support. I'll be back with more. Stay informed, stay European.